You know that pain you keep trying to explain away, that betrayal you keep minimizing. Listen to me. They knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional. And the first step to healing is telling the truth about what really happened. It starts with the little things, doesn't it? The quick apologies that feel empty. The way they laugh it off when you try to speak up. The moments you question yourself because the hurt is real, but the justification sounds so reasonable. You tell yourself they were stressed. You tell yourself they didn't mean it like that. You tell yourself you're being dramatic, too sensitive, too much. But deep down, something feels off. There's a voice inside you, quiet, persistent, whispering the truth. That voice knows, and the truth is, they didn't just hurt you, they chose to. It's a hard truth to look at. Because when you admit they did it on purpose, the narrative you've clung to, the one that made the pain survivable, starts to unravel. It feels safer to believe they were unaware, careless, thoughtless. Safer to believe they didn't fully grasp how their actions affected you. But that belief keeps you stuck in a cycle where your wounds never close. Because deep down, you know they saw your hurt. You know they watched you shrink, crack, falter, and they kept going. That isn't carelessness. That's cruelty wearing a familiar face. When you protect them from accountability, you abandon yourself. And maybe you've done it for years. Maybe you were taught to keep the peace no matter the cost. Maybe you learned that love means enduring pain, that family means silence, that loyalty means swallowing the truth. But hear this, you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You do not have to keep paying the emotional bill for someone else's deliberate harm. Love is not supposed to hurt like this, and if it does, it's not love, it's control. You can't heal from what you won't name. And too often, we water down the truth to make it easier for others to digest. We call it a misunderstanding when it was actually manipulation. We say they were just having a bad day when it was really a pattern of behavior. We say they didn't mean to when we know they did. Every time you minimize what happened, you reinforce the idea that their comfort matters more than your pain. But your pain matters. Your voice matters. Your truth matters, and it deserves to be spoken out loud, without apology. You don't need more compassion for the person who hurt you. You've already given them the benefit of the doubt over and over again. What you need now is compassion for the part of you that's still carrying the weight of what they did. The part of you that keeps replaying their words, trying to decode the meaning. The part that still wonders what you could have done differently to avoid it. That part of you isn't weak, it's wounded, and it deserves your care more than they ever did. Stop pouring grace into hands that only took from you. This is your permission to stop explaining away the pain. To stop covering for people who knew better and still chose to do harm. They made their choice, now it's your turn. Your healing starts with honesty, with saying, yes, they meant to hurt me, and I'm not going to protect their image at the expense of my own recovery. There is power in speaking the truth, even if it trembles on your tongue. There is freedom in finally calling it what it was, because only then can you begin to choose yourself, not in theory, but in practice. And you are worth choosing every single time. When someone wounds you on purpose, the damage goes deeper than the moment itself. It reaches into the core of who you believe you are, and before long, the pain starts whispering lies. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe if I had been quieter, nicer, more understanding, this wouldn't have happened. That's the cruelty of intentional harm. It doesn't just hurt you. It reshapes the way you see yourself. And unless you name it, unless you fight back with truth, you start internalizing the abuse as identity. You start confusing their dysfunction with your worth. But let's make something very clear. Their behavior was never a reflection of your value. Never. The moment someone chooses to harm, to gaslight, to betray, to belittle, that moment tells you everything about them and absolutely nothing about what you are worth. There are people in this world who will hurt simply because they can. Because control makes them feel powerful, because your light reminded them of everything they were not. That is not your fault. That is not your burden. That is not your shame to carry. And you are allowed to say, without stuttering, they were wrong. Not me. You are not too sensitive for reacting to cruelty. You are not dramatic for needing respect. You are not difficult for demanding basic decency. Somewhere along the line, someone taught you that love means shrinking. That being easy to love means having no needs, no edges, no boundaries. That's a lie. Real love doesn't ask you to become less of yourself so someone else can feel comfortable. Real love meets you where you are and says, stay loud. Stay whole. I see you and I choose you. You are allowed to take up space without apologizing. You are allowed to have needs and still be worthy. It's heartbreaking how many people spend years, or even decades, trying to prove they are lovable to someone who made a decision to never see their worth. They twist themselves into versions they barely recognize. They get quieter, smaller, more agreeable, and still, it's never enough. That's not your failure. That's their emptiness. You are not broken because they could not hold your heart. You are not unworthy because they refuse to treat you with dignity. Sometimes people cannot love you because they have no love inside them to give, and that has nothing to do with your value. You don't need to earn basic human decency. You don't need to prove that you're worthy of kindness, of honesty, of care. Those are not rewards. They are the minimum. Stop auditioning for someone else's love. Stop bending your soul to win the approval of someone who doesn't even know how to value themselves. Because the more you chase that validation, the further you drift from yourself. And the further you drift, the louder the lie becomes. Maybe they were right about me, but they weren't. They never were. You are not hard to love. They were just not capable of love. This is not about vengeance. This is about coming home to yourself, about remembering who you were before the world told you that you were only as good as your ability to please others. You don't have to carry their rejection like it's a mirror. You don't have to relive their cruelty every time you look in the glass. You can say, that was about them, not me. You can remind yourself over and over, if needed, that you were always worthy. From the very beginning, and no one's inability to see your value ever had the power to take it away. We live in a world that teaches us to be silent about our pain, that tells us speaking the truth makes us bitter, angry, dramatic. That holding someone accountable means you haven't moved on. But let's get one thing straight. Accountability is not bitterness. It's bravery. It takes courage to stand in the truth when everything around you is telling you to be quiet. It takes strength to name what happened when people would rather pretend it didn't. And it takes deep, soul-level self-respect to stop defending the ones who broke you just because it makes others more comfortable. Too often, survivors are expected to carry the weight of someone else's actions and stay quiet about it. Be the bigger person, take the high road, don't make a scene, but that kind of silence isn't noble, it's dangerous. Because it teaches you to bury your voice. It teaches you to hide your wounds, and in that silence, shame grows, not just your own, but theirs. Because people who hurt others intentionally rely on your silence to keep their image intact. They count on your fear, your guilt, your need to protect everyone but yourself. And every time you bite your tongue, they win. Calling something what it is does not make you cruel. It makes you honest. Saying that was abuse, that was betrayal, that was manipulation, is not about holding on to pain. It's about refusing to carry someone else's lie. You can't heal what you're not allowed to name. You can't forgive what you're not allowed to feel. You can't move forward while pretending you were never wounded. And when someone demands your silence after causing you harm, they're not asking for peace. They're asking for permission to keep doing it. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. Accountability isn't about vengeance. It's about integrity. It's saying, you don't get to hurt me and walk away like nothing happened. It's not about punishment. It's about truth. And truth matters, not because it changes the past, but because it frees the future. When you speak it, boldly, clearly, without apology, you stop being the keeper of their secrets. You stop being the container for their chaos. You say, what you did mattered, and I matter too. That is not weakness. That is not pettiness. That is the fiercest kind of self-love there is. And if someone tells you to just let it go, ask them this: why does my truth make you uncomfortable? Why is my healing inconvenient for you? Because the people who rush you to forgive, to forget, to get over it, are usually the ones who benefit from your silence. Letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means letting go of the idea that you ever had to carry it alone. It means releasing the shame that was never yours to begin with. It means walking away not just from the person who hurt you, but from the entire belief system that told you not to speak about it. When you start holding people accountable, you're not just healing yourself, you're breaking a cycle. You are showing others that it's okay to speak up, that it's okay to tell the truth even when it shakes the room. That pain does not have to be buried to be valid. That silence is not the price you have to pay for survival. You reclaim your story not as a victim, but as a survivor who chose to stand in the fire and speak anyway. And in doing so, you light the path for someone else to do the same. There's a part of you that's still waiting for someone to admit what they did, to say the words they never said, to finally look you in the eye and acknowledge the damage they caused. And that hope, that longing for closure, is one of the most painful weights you carry. But here's the truth no one tells you. You may never get the apology. You may never get the explanation. You may never hear them say, "Yes, I hurt you, and I'm sorry." And you know what? That doesn't mean your pain is any less valid. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means the responsibility to heal is yours, even if the fault never was. Waiting for them to take responsibility is like standing in a burning building, hoping the person who lit the match will come back with water. They won't. They already walked away, and some of them left smiling. Some of them will twist the story, play the victim, or pretend it never happened. They'll call you crazy, dramatic, unforgiving, because accountability feels like attack to people who have never faced the consequences of their actions. But you don't need their permission to tell the truth. You don't need their agreement to call it what it was. You get to validate your own experience. They may never feel remorse, but that doesn't change what they did. Just because someone refuses to own their behavior doesn't mean you have to carry their denial. You are not required to hold both your pain and their excuses. You are not required to absorb their silence and call it strength. You get to say, "I saw what I saw, I felt what I felt, and I will no longer gaslight myself just because they refuse to be honest." You don't need anyone else to sign your truth for it to be real. If it hurt, it hurt. And that matters. There is no healing in pretending. You can't think your way out of trauma. You can't bury betrayal beneath fake forgiveness and expect your heart to forget. Healing doesn't come from denying what happened. It comes from facing it. From saying, "This is where it broke. This is who did it. And this is what I will no longer tolerate." You don't rise by ignoring the wound. You rise by cleaning it, tending to it, and refusing to let the infection of their silence poison your spirit. This is not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your voice in a world that tried to strip it from you. You were taught that being the bigger person means staying silent, but real strength is not swallowing your truth to make others feel better. Real strength is standing in your story without shame. It's saying, "I was hurt, and I'm allowed to say so." It's refusing to let someone else's lack of accountability turn you into someone who doubts their own reality. You do not have to pretend it didn't break you just to make them feel whole. You don't have to stay quiet just because the truth makes people uncomfortable. Some truths are meant to disrupt. There will come a moment, maybe today, maybe not for years, when you stop waiting for them to do what's right. When you finally realize that healing was never about them at all. It was about you choosing yourself over and over again, no matter how loudly the world told you not to. And in that moment, something shifts. You stop begging for closure and start creating it. You stop hoping they'll acknowledge the pain and start honoring it yourself, because the apology you thought you needed. You don't. You just needed to believe yourself. There comes a moment in every healing journey where you have to face a brutal question. Why do I keep giving grace to someone who never earned it? Why do I keep offering compassion, softness, and understanding to the same person who met me with disregard? At first, it might feel noble, loving, even righteous. You tell yourself that you're just being kind, that you're choosing the high road. But behind that nobility, there's something deeper happening. You're not just offering grace. You're overcompensating for someone else's cruelty. And that pattern doesn't come from weakness. It comes from a deep wound, a deep hope that maybe your kindness can heal what they keep breaking. But your kindness was never the problem. Your capacity to love deeply, to forgive freely, to hold space for someone else's humanity, those are not flaws. But when you keep pouring that love into someone who only takes, only wounds, only drains, you become the one bleeding. Every time you excuse their behavior, every time you rationalize the hurt, every time you say they didn't mean it, you reinforce a dangerous message that your pain is a price you're willing to pay to keep someone in your life. And that is not love. That is self-abandonment disguised as compassion. You cannot save people from the consequences of their own actions, no matter how much you love them, no matter how deeply you understand them, no matter how much pain they carry. Empathy does not mean self-erasure. You can hold space for someone's past without letting them destroy your present. You can acknowledge their trauma without sacrificing your own healing. Grace doesn't mean letting someone off the hook. It means letting yourself off the hook for fixing what you didn't break. And the truth is, they never needed more of your grace. You did. You needed it for yourself. For the part of you that kept bending to survive what should have never been normal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop protecting the person who hurt you, not out of hate, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity, out of truth, out of finally understanding that your soul is not a dumping ground for someone else's unresolved pain. You are not required to justify their actions anymore. You are not responsible for their growth. You are allowed to say, I gave you every chance. I gave you understanding and patience and more forgiveness than you deserved. And now I'm done giving you access to my heart at the expense of my sanity. There is a point where continuing to love someone becomes a form of self-harm, where every second chance turns into a deeper cut, and no one talks about that. No one talks about the grief of walking away from someone you still care about, but know you can no longer survive. Because choosing yourself isn't easy when your entire identity has been wrapped in keeping the peace. But healing requires honesty, and the honest truth is, if loving them keeps destroying you, it's not love. It's a slow erosion of your spirit, and you were not born to live small and afraid in someone else's storm. You don't have to harden your heart to protect it. You don't have to become cold, bitter, or closed off. You just have to learn the difference between self-sacrifice and self-respect, between love and loyalty to someone else and love and loyalty to yourself. The version of you that kept giving them chance after chance was doing the best they could. But now you know more. You've seen the pattern. You've lived the cost. And this time, your grace gets to go where it was always meant to go first, back to you. There's a part of healing no one talks about. The part where you realize that the life you built while surviving isn't the one you want to live anymore. You start to look around and see the patterns. The people you kept close just to feel safe. The places you stayed just to avoid being abandoned again. The habits you clung to that made you feel in control. And suddenly, survival isn't enough. You want more. You want joy. You want peace. You want to feel whole, not just functional. And to get there, you have to do something terrifying. You have to let go of the version of yourself that pain created. That version of you strong, guarded, always ready to anticipate the next betrayal, served a purpose. She kept you alive. She got you through nights when it felt like your soul had been shattered in 1,000 pieces. She knew how to keep smiling while quietly breaking. She knew how to read a room, how to stay small, how to be what everyone needed so no one would leave, and for a long time, that version of you was necessary. But now she's tired, and you are allowed to thank her for her service, and let her rest, because surviving is not the same as living. Living requires something different. It requires softness. It requires risk. It requires the courage to show up open, even after the world gave you every reason to shut down, and that's the thing about healing. It will ask you to step into the very thing you once ran from. Intimacy, vulnerability, trust not with the people who hurt you, but with yourself, with your future, with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the next chapter won't be a repeat of the last, and that requires shedding the armor that once kept you safe, but now keeps you stuck. You cannot build a future from the wreckage of your past if you keep returning to the same emotional blueprint. The self-protective instincts that helped you survive can become walls that block love, joy, and connection. You start rejecting good people because your nervous system only recognizes chaos as familiar. You start sabotaging peace because your body has been conditioned to expect war. That's not weakness, that's trauma. And the only way to rewrite that code is to choose differently over and over again, even when it feels unfamiliar, even when it terrifies you, because freedom lives on the other side of discomfort. This next version of you will scare people who only knew you as broken. People who are comfortable with your silence, who liked you better when you didn't ask for more. Don't shrink back for them. Don't apologize for evolving. You are not responsible for how your healing makes others uncomfortable. You are not required to stay wounded just so others can feel superior or needed or in control. You get to outgrow people. You get to outgrow your past. You get to say, that was me then, but this is who I am now. That's not betrayal, that's becoming. The truth is, the real you was never broken. She was just buried under layers of pain, people, pleasing, fear, and survival, and now she's rising, not because everything has been fixed, but because you're finally choosing to stop betraying yourself to stay loyal to a story that was never yours to carry. Healing isn't a return to who you were. It's the emergence of who you've always been underneath the hurt. And she's not fragile, she's not naive, she's not lost, she's powerful, she's clear, and she's ready. They hurt you, intentionally, and for a long time, that truth tried to destroy you, but look at you. You're still standing, still breathing, still rising, not because they apologized, not because they changed, but because you did. You stopped begging for love from people who weaponized your softness. You stopped explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose yourself instead. That is the revolution. Not healing so you can let them back in, but healing so you can finally let yourself out of the cage of their silence, out of the story they wrote for you, out of the patterns you were never meant to repeat. You are not who they said you were. You are who you decided to become after surviving them. So no, this isn't just about pain. It's about power, your power, and now that you've reclaimed it, don't ever give it back.